Knowing how to manage your paid media spend is just critical as a business, because if you aren't increasing or decreasing at the right time, what's gonna happen is you're gonna find yourself either plateauing or declining fast. I mean, to be honest, I have seen ads managers that are supposed to be these wonderful things turn into just cash eating machines that burn down businesses who can't control them. But the ones who know their caps and taps, is what we like to call them, their current allocation percentages and their target allocation percentages, and adjust accordingly, are the ones who experience growth and profit in their businesses. So this episode really stems from a question that I've been asked a lot in the last few weeks. How do I determine my advertising budget? And then following on that, when do I increase and when do I decrease? So 2 questions. How do I determine my budget? And then how do I increase or decrease? When do I know to do that? And this is a very critical question that you need to be asking yourself if you're not asking yourself. And to answer this, I like to think of marketing as a whole, not just advertising. I like to think of it like a financial investment. You know, when you consistently invest in your financial portfolio, like in the States here, we have Roth IRAs, 401ks, et cetera, and wherever you're from, it might be a little bit different. But when you consistently invest in your portfolio, you dollar cost average, and then you experience this compound growth. And the same applies to marketing. As you continue to invest, I guess you could call it dollar cost averaging. This is where some weeks are probably down, other weeks are probably up. But if you can commit to doing that, you will experience this compounded growth over time. But you have to be able to weather the storm mentally, because it is mentally hard to still keep spending when things are down. And it's mentally difficult not to just 5x your budget when you see things going well on the opposite side of the coin. And one of the few things that people forget when it comes to business is that there's this thing called the year-over-year halo effect, where all of the energy that you have built up, all of the assets and all of the things you've been doing and you've built up in year 1 will begin to support you in year 2, in year 3, in year 4. And so that's where this compound effect starts to take place. You know, when you're spending money on Facebook, for example, you're not only spending money to buy customers, you're spending money to buy data and additional brand assets that are not customers. Things like audiences of people that visited your site or watched your video, or things like email lids of people who came to your website and gave you their email address when you had your welcome pop-up, pops up after 15 seconds and they joined, but they didn't buy right then and they come back and they buy later. It's one of those things where you have to be willing to consistently spend over time. You have to pick a budget, whatever that budget is, whatever you can afford, and then you have to commit to spending that for not just a week or a day or a month, but 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, and more. And you have to maintain that habit. So you have to really commit to investing, because it's gonna take you a while to figure out target audiences, good creative, good copy, the messaging that really resonates, and then also optimize your entry point. We call these EPFs, your evergreen product funnel. What is that new customer acquisition entry point? And you will optimize that sales journey over time. So you have to commit to it. You have to want to fuel constantly your ads, because if you could do that, it's gonna continue to fuel your business well beyond just today and next week and the following weeks. And the other thing that I see is many people don't spend enough. They don't reinvest enough of the money that they're making, or they don't put aside enough money in their business for marketing. So the question is, how much, Josh, how the heck much should I spend on my advertising? Well, I was curious to see what other people were saying. And so what I did was I know what I think and I know what I see, and I'm gonna share that in a second. But I was curious what people are allocating toward marketing and what all of the other big publications and companies out there are recommending. And so I went and I looked at Forbes, I looked at HubSpot, I looked at Shopify, I looked at all kinds of different publications, and what they were saying is recommended. And the largest, most common answer is in alignment with Forbes. Forbes says you should be spending 5 to 10% of your total revenue on marketing. Now this is on marketing, like overall, like ads, email, social, SMS, SEO, web, like all of those things. That is everything. 5 to 10% of your top line gross revenue on marketing. My thoughts on that. I have never seen a brand spend only 5 to 10% on overall marketing, let alone advertising, and grow at a healthy and profitable rate, especially in e-commerce. Now, I want to be fair here. Of course, Forbes, HubSpot, a lot of these big companies they're taking into consideration business to business, not business to consumer. They're taking into consideration both of these. They're not just taking into consideration only business to consumer. But the more I Googled, I was curious. E-commerce recommended advertising budgets. If you go Google that, you're gonna see things like 7 to 8%, 8 to 12%, 10 to 15%, 5 to 10%, 5 to 10%, 5 to 10%. You're gonna see this over and over and over again. I wanna share with you my recommendation and then how to manage this so that it doesn't eat you alive. Because if you don't manage your budgets with advertising, it will eat you alive. My recommendation is that you spend 15 to 30% of your revenue on a weekly basis on advertising. If you want two things. Number one, you want to be growing, you need to spend 15 to 30%. Number two, you want to be profitable. The reason I say that is because if we go over 30%, then we start to venture into this aggressive area of new customer acquisition that typically will put you upside down for a temporary period of time, whether that's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever that is. And unless you have the cash reserves to weather that storm, it's going to put you in a deficit. So I don't like being in a strong deficit for a long period of time. Sometimes I'm willing to weather the storm for like a month at the most, but I don't want to weather this for 2-3 months unless you have venture backing, you have capital sitting in the bank, and you're willing to do that. So if you can sit between 15 and 30% of your revenue in advertising spend on a weekly basis, and I'm going to talk about weekly and how there's an importance to the weekly. But if you can do that, you're gonna be growing and you'll be profitable along the way. Because let's say you did 25%. Well, this leaves room for your COGS, for your overhead, your taxes, and your profit while keeping your ad spend in check. And I will say this. If you're listening and you're like, Josh, I don't think it's possible to do 15 or 20% or 25% of my revenue in ad spend without putting myself upside down, then the truth is you're probably really fat somewhere else and you need to trim that fat. You have overhead that's probably unnecessary. And if you really want to grow, if you really want to create better margin and a bigger database of customers and a higher volume of new customer acquisition flow, you're gonna have to trim some of the non-profit producing things that you're paying for, some of the software that you're paying for that are kind of nice to have. Maybe you're overstaffed. That's also really common where you get excited, you overhire. We did that, put us in loads of debt, put us in a bad spot. We've learned our lesson, probably like 6 times over. And then the 6th time was the time we actually learned. So you need to trim some fat somewhere if that's too much. That said, to manage ad spend without getting eaten alive, because this is an ongoing process, it's not like just one and done, you have to maintain some habits. And to do that, there are 2 questions that you must answer. Question number 1 is, how do I make decisions on an overall budget level with my advertising? We call these taps and caps. I'm gonna walk you through those. The second question you need to answer is, how do I make decisions on a campaign, ad set, and ad level? So we have the overall budget, right? How do I make decisions on an overall budget level? And then number 2 is going down a little bit. Okay, well, how do I make decisions on a campaign, ad set, and ad level? Because technically all different campaigns and ad sets, etc., those are gonna have their own budgets, right? So there's 2 kinds of budgets. High level budget, this is how much I'm willing to spend per day or per week broken down by day. And then this is how much I'm willing to spend in different budgets. And when do I know what to do within those different campaigns? So let's kind of start with the budget level, the higher level management side of things. First of all, you will need to track, if you're gonna follow what I'm gonna break down here and how we make sure that we don't get eaten alive and find ourselves in a really bad position, is first of all, you need to track your revenue and your ad spend weekly. Now you can go pay for a software to do this. We prefer a spreadsheet. We call this a scorecard, kind of like if we were a sports team, although nobody here is really into sports, so maybe I should change my analogy here. If we were a sports team, we could look at the scoreboard and say, are we winning, are we losing, and what's the reality, right? So we call these a scorecard. If you don't have one, it's very, very easy. Just pull out a Google Sheet or a spreadsheet and say, okay, what is my revenue and what is my ad spend? And then you need to have a custom calculation to then calculate your ad spend percentage. So if my revenue last week was 10,000 and my ad spend was 5,000, then I have a 50% ad spend percentage, which is too high. We got to pull that back a little bit, right? So we need to track this weekly. And the reason we're looking at weekly is because we're going to use some averages to determine what we're doing each week based on some past weeks. So first thing, you're going to have to track revenue, ad spend, and ad spend percentage. Now, once you're tracking this, we have to establish your you have to establish, not we, this is you. You have to establish your TAPs and your caps. Now, I stole this terminology from Mike Michalowicz with Profit First. If you've never read it, it's a great book. Go read it. It'll change your financial business life. Anyway, TAPs stand for target allocation percentages, and caps stand for current allocation percentages. Because in an ideal world, we would always be, our current would always be in our target, right? But that's not how it works. What happens is you start the week out with your target. Say, let's say my target range was 25% to 30%, and that's my TAPs range. We do a 5% range. But then I ended the week at 50%, well, my current allocation percentages just got way out of whack. Or maybe revenue, we ran some promos from email and organic really picked up, and we had this halo effect that we talked about kicking in, and our revenue was really high one week, and our 25% that we started the week with our budget at ended up by the end of the week becoming 18% because we just had a huge spike in revenue that just impacted our overall percentages. And so you need to establish your target allocation percentage range and then you're going to measure that against your current allocation percentage range every single week. Now, my recommendation, and the reason I say you have to establish your TAPs is because the recommendation is 15 to 30% if you want to be growing and you want to be profitable. And so we personally, now this is us, you do it, you do you. We do 25 to 30%. We're in the high, that is our 5% range. I recommend a 5% range. So you might say, okay, I'm willing to spend 15 to 20%. Great, do it. You don't have to be 25 to 30%. If you have a lot of overhead, if you're kind of like in a slow season right now in your business and you have a lot of overhead, you're already slim on margin, you might have to just start a little bit lower and climb up as you go. And the cool thing is, as you climb up, as long as your other things are in check, eventually your overhead and your fixed costs are fixed, right? So most of those fixed costs are gonna become a smaller percentage of your budget, and then you can actually be a little bit more aggressive. So you have to determine your range. If it's 15 to 20, 20 to 25, or 25 to 30, pick your target allocation percentage range and stick with it for at least a month to see how it feels. We do 25 to 30. And then if we're tracking every week, you're gonna be able to see, okay, well, I'm trying to stay between 25 and 30. And after the week's over, I'm gonna run all the numbers. I'm gonna say, okay, well, what did it end up shaking out to be? And it'll probably be a decimal percentage. It might be like, my goal was 25%, so I committed to 25% for an entire week, and it ended up at 26 point something percent. It means that my revenue maybe went down a little bit that week is probably what that's gonna mean. Other weeks, if your revenue goes up, this percentage is gonna be smaller. And so we're gonna track every week, and we're gonna use how we're gonna determine our budget each week, which is why earlier I said weekly we use this, is we look at the last 4-week average. If I look at 1 week, it can skew the numbers really, really greatly. And then we're gonna just go kill all this stuff in Ads Manager, and it's just gonna wreck your results. So we like to use the last 4 weeks because it gives us a good average, especially if you're a subscription brand or you have products that are more residual and people buy, like, let's say once a month. You're probably gonna have 1 week of the month that is like a higher revenue week, and another week of the month might be a lower revenue. So if we're making a budgetary decision to say how much we're willing to spend this week based on only last week's revenue numbers, well, then it's gonna probably not be very stable and it'll be really volatile. And so we like to look at the last 4 weeks, and we do it every Monday. So every Monday we say, okay, what was our last 4 weeks of revenue, our last 4 weeks of ad spend, and then that third row in our spreadsheet is the average ad spend percentage between those 4 weeks. So we'll look at the 4-week average and we'll say, okay, for example, if our TAP was 25 to 30, our target allocation percentage range was 25 to 30%, but we ran the numbers and we were 21%, well, that's actually good news. What that means is we committed to a lower percentage, or we committed to a percentage of budget that week, and over the last 4 weeks, our revenue is rising. That's great. We have this halo effect. We have this holistic rise in revenue because ads are a tide that raises all boats. Email, SMS, organic, everything, right? So if our TAP was 25 to 30. In the last 4 weeks, it's Monday morning, I open up, we look at our scorecard and we say, oh, the last 4-week average was actually 21%. So that means last week we probably had a big spike in revenue. Well, guess what I'm gonna do? I need to now increase my budget this week. So if my budget was, I'm gonna use simple numbers. If my budget was $1,000, well, I need to go, and $1,000 represented 25% of my weekly revenue. So that would be, let's say 25 is where I started the week. That means my revenue is 4,000 and I was spending 1,000. But over the last 4 weeks, now it became an average of 21. That 1,000 was an average of 21%. I need to increase my percentage allocation for this week. So I need to go do the math and I need to then increase my budget. Now the question is, what do we increase it to? It can be anything in the range of 25 to 30%, and it's up to you. And the reason it's up to you is because, like, let's say you see revenue starting to rise. Well, then you can adjust to maybe move your ad spend. If you're at 21, you can move to 25, 26, 27, all the way up to 30. You get to choose. But if you see revenue on an upward trend, then you can adjust it to maybe the higher end of that, maybe 27, maybe move your ad spend budget for that week. We're committing for 1 week at a time to 27 to 28%, knowing that if you see a trend in revenue going up, or you know that, hey, this week we have a ton of subscriptions renewing, or we're expecting all of these sales to come in because we're running a promo sprint. If you know that that's gonna happen, you can bump your budget to 27 to 28%, knowing that it's likely by the end of the week gonna become a lower percentage of the overall revenue. But on the opposite side, if you see revenue kind of plateauing or declining, or going into a slower week, you might just want to do the minimum and bump it from 21% average, just bump the ad spend to 25% of your overall last 4-week average revenue, just to be a little bit more conservative. So this is how we will budget on the high level every week. So we work 1 week at a time. And when we look at a week, we commit to the whole week. We say, okay, if we're gonna spend X amount of dollars this week, we're gonna reset every week. So every week, Monday, we're gonna go look at the last 4-week average. Maybe if we're in the 25 to 30% range, we just leave the budget and we say, this is what we're working with. So if we kill things inside the ads manager, we're gonna just replace those things with new budget. This keeps us in check because it's really tempting. If something's going well, it's really tempting to just wanna blow it out of the water. But in our experience, it's great when it's great. It doesn't always work like that. And so sometimes you try to ramp up and it doesn't go well and it puts you in a bad position. So commit for a week and say, I'm willing to commit 7 days, this much over that 7 days. So divide that out. I'm willing to commit if it's $200 or $100 a day in ad spend or whatever that is. Some of you are a lot higher than that. Whatever it is, commit to it for an entire week and then reset the next week based on the previous 4-week averages. So it's gonna give us averages and it's gonna allow us to be a little bit behind by 1 week. It's gonna have a lag in the ad spend adjustment. So that's how we manage the high level budget. We commit for the whole week. Now, the second level down is, well, what do we do on the campaign and ad set level, right? Because maybe things are going really, really well in there and you're gonna wanna increase the overall budget and you just wanna start scaling things and duplicating things. Or things are going really bad. And so you wanna slice your budget in half. And let's say you were starting the week at 25% and you wanna slice it down to 10% because things aren't going well. Well, while it might feel good in the temporary, you start to forget about the long term, or you don't get to experience some of that trickle effect that happens. This happens all the time. I was on a coaching call yesterday and one of the guys, Mike in our program, he's like, someone joined, came from an ad 2 weeks prior, from one ad set 2 weeks prior, got on my email list, in 14 days to the day later, placed a $1,500 order, or it was like a $1,200 order, something along those lines. Placed that order, a huge order, that much later. Facebook didn't catch the conversion of it. That's the halo effect I'm talking about. You might feel the temporary satisfaction, but you will be sacrificing the long-term gain. And also, it kind of hurts your mental fortitude game. Like, we're trying to get these reps of like staying strong mentally. And as long as you're in the percentages that are comfortable, you should be in a good spot. So what do we do on the ad set, the campaign, and the ad level? This is the really, really easy part. We are going to kill and we're going to scale things and amplify things based on KPIs. So if your KPI is, you're looking at ROAS and saying, hey, my break-even ROAS is 2, my target is at least 2.5 to 3, and if it's below 2, we're gonna kill things, but then we just replace them with other things that are more likely to perform based on what we're seeing. That's how you're just gonna manage your ads, but you're gonna cap your daily limit based on what you're trying to spend for the entire week. Okay, so you're gonna have to commit to that weekly, and it's real simple. You're gonna kill, and you're gonna scale, and you're gonna manage your account based on KPIs, always fighting for better results. Pretty common sense. You know that. You're already doing that. But this is going to keep you in check from saying, oh, I want to kill things because it doesn't feel good right now. Or I want to scale things because I want to be really aggressive and I got this one thing that's really working, so I want to like 10x the budget on it. But you have to stay. And so this kind of hedges that. It makes sure it gives you mental fortitude. That's the first thing. And then it also shows that you're committed to that budget and allows you to experience a more healthy growth as you go about this. And it doesn't give you license to 5x your budgets because you found something winning. Because I will say this, that is, while it sounds great, it's great when it's great, but it isn't always great, right? So if something's working, we go to amplify it, then you could really throw your revenue out of whack. You don't get the revenue, but you have a high ad spend, and then suddenly, before you know it, by the end of the week, you just spent 50% of your revenue that week, not including COGS, overhead, and all that stuff. You might spend 50 or 60% of your revenue in ad spend, and you don't want to do that. That's an unhealthy way to manage ads. And so my way might be a little bit less sexy than some other people's that want to go and they want to scale in like 2 or 3x budgets as fast as humanly possible. I totally get it, but I've seen more people crash and burn from being impatient than the ones that had the mental fortitude to say, nope, I've set my threshold. Win or lose, I have committed to this for at least this week, and then I'm going to reevaluate. I'm going to take longer averages. I'm going to look at a 4-week average, not just 1 week, to make decisions, and I'm going to trust the math over the emotion, because marketing is a mathematical equation, not an emotional decision. Well, you, my friend, have been listening to the Ecommerce Alley podcast, produced by Dylan Counts. And if you have not joined the Ecommerce Alley group, go join it. We just crossed the 4,000 member line. Super cool. We go live every single Thursday in the studio. We have tons of PDFs and spreadsheets and scorecards and all kinds of stuff that we give away, how we optimize ads, etc. for free in the group. Go to alleypodcast.com/group. It's free to join. It'll be absolutely worth it. And we'll see you in the next episode.